You might think Hulk Hogan's time in the spotlight ended with his passing in July, but a new, potentially explosive chapter is currently unfolding. His family is now reportedly taking more steps that could open the door to a medical malpractice lawsuit. We're going to dig into the investigation, the unanswered questions surrounding his death, and what this could mean legally with insight from a civil and personal injury attorney. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Now, when Hulk Hogan, the wrestling legend, passed away this past July at age 71, at first, it seemed this was just a tragic end, a sad end to an icon in entertainment. We knew all the answers, and that was it. But that has not been the case. As you know, from what we've been covering here on Sidebar, there's a lot of strange details surrounding his death. And now, his family is making waves in the legal world. They have just filed a petition asking for extra time to explore a potential medical malpractice lawsuit in connection with his death. And the implications could be significant. Because here's the thing, nothing has been filed yet. No one has officially been accused of wrongdoing. But the move signals that Hogan's widow, Sky Daly, and his son, Nicholas Battaglia, are seriously considering whether mistakes in Hulk Hogan's medical care may have contributed to his death. And before we get into the latest, though, I got to catch you up because there is a lot to unpack here. Hulk Hogan, born Terry Battaglia, died on July 24, 2025 at his Clearwater, Florida home. Now, initially, the Pinellas County Medical Examiner's Office determined his death was natural, attributing it to a heart attack stemming from atrial fibrillation, this is an irregular heartbeat, and chronic lymphocytic leukemia. He reportedly collapsed at his home while recovering from surgery, having been released from the hospital just a day prior. That's according to the Tampa Bay Times. But even though the cause of death was ruled as natural, questions quickly emerged. The Clearwater Police Department told Law&Crime at the time, quote, "The Clearwater Police Department continues its investigation into the July 24th death of Terry Battaglia, also known as Hulk Hogan. The unique nature of this case has required us to interview multiple witnesses and seek medical records from a variety of providers, and our detectives continue to do that. All of this takes time. Until the investigation is completed, no records related to the case, including body camera footage, can be released." And to be clear, no records, including body cam footage, have been released yet, and police have said the investigation is still active. Well, I'll tell you this much, Hogan's friends and family, they have also weighed in publicly about this. WWE Hall of Famer Jimmy Hart, who knew Hulk Hogan for decades, described the sudden nature of his death to People magazine, saying, quote, "I called Hogan on Wednesday night, and then Thursday morning is when everything took place. So just overnight it all happened, but it was so positive the day before. It just hit so fast. It was like, oh my God, we thought he was doing so well, you know?" Now, Hart recounted that Hogan had been enjoying life, watching wrestling, doing karaoke with his son Nick, simply living his best post-ring life, despite the chronic wear and tear on his body from years of wrestling. But meanwhile, Hogan's widow, Sky Daly, has raised questions about whether complications from a neck procedure, a neck surgery that Hogan underwent in May, whether that played a role in his passing. Specifically, she claims that during the procedure, Hogan's phrenic nerve, which controls the diaphragm and breathing, that was compromised. According to Sky, this issue caused him long-term breathing difficulties, potentially contributing to his death 2 months later. She told the Daily Mail, "If you have shortness of breath for a long time, that makes you very sick. It's not something that's an alarming, sudden cause of death. It's something that wears on you, makes you weak." TMZ also reported that during the 911 call on the day that Hogan died, Sky said, "My husband's not breathing. He just stopped breathing." So this would seem to contrast with the heart attack narrative in a way, right? Hogan reportedly didn't have chest pain or a sudden cardiac episode, but simply stopped breathing, at least according to this narrative. And adding to all this, adding to the mystery, is that apparently an occupational therapist was present at Hogan's home that day. And that therapist reportedly told police that a surgeon had severed the phrenic nerve during his recent surgery. This is according to reporting from TMZ. Sources say this is detailed in a police report and recorded in body cam footage that hasn't been publicly released. And we here at Law&Crime, we've requested this footage, but we haven't received it yet. Now, according to the Cleveland Clinic, damage to this nerve can seriously affect breathing, giving context to why this potential surgical error has raised concern. We don't know for sure if that's what happened. But Skye has been very public about her intentions, explaining that Hogan has not yet been cremated. She said the family wants to complete a medical investigation before honoring his wishes. So if you're a fan of Sidebar, by the way, then you know we cover a lot of cases and we put out a lot of clips a day. And I will tell you, you might be saying, how are you able to do that? Well, we use a platform called Opus Clips. So if you're online, if you're on social media, this may be of interest to you. It is an all-in-one AI editor that makes it easier and faster to cut, create, and upload videos across all social media platforms. Through the power of AI, Opus Clip automatically generates B-roll, it cleans up audio, and it reframes your videos for any platform. It is so easy to start using. Let me show you how right now. All you got to do is go to opus.pro/sidebar. You sign up, you upload a video, and in just a few minutes, you will have tons of perfectly edited clips ready to go. So whether you're making videos for TikTok or Shorts or Instagram Reels, Opus Clip is your one-stop shop for getting your best content seen by more viewers across all these platforms with the press of just one button. And if you're wondering how good these AI-edited videos are from Opus Clip, just look at our content here at Law&Crime. Our producers have used Opus to help us cut and share clips of some of our biggest trials, and we do it very, very quickly. So at Sidebar, look, we know our listeners have a lot of opinions and ideas to share, and this is the most powerful tool there is to help you edit like a pro and grow your audience. So give it a try for yourself. Go to opus.pro/sidebar to start creating your own videos today. All right, so before we get into this new filing, I want to bring on Perry Fallick, who's a civil and personal injury attorney, partner at the Morelli Law Firm based in New York. So happy to have you on, Perry. Good to see you again. So, okay, let's start here. How does an official cause of death, when we talk about like a natural heart attack, for example, how does that affect potential civil claims?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. So the death certificate is one piece of evidence that you're going to potentially use in a civil cause of action. So it's not the end-all be-all. Now, obviously, if I'm a plaintiff's attorney and I'm bringing a case, I would love if the death certificate cause of action supported my theory of the case and supported my claims. But a lot of the time, that's not the case. And it's something that defendants may use, and they may point to the death certificate and say, hey, look, it says natural. We didn't do anything wrong here. But that's just not the facts. That's not true. The medical records themselves are going to tell the story of what led to the cause of action. Now, almost every time, or most of the time, someone's heart is stopping is the last thing that happens before a person passes away. Now, there may be multiple things that led to that and caused the heart to stop, but cardiac arrest may be listed as the official cause of death. But that doesn't mean that the person died of a heart attack necessarily.
So in other words, it doesn't foreclose, it doesn't preclude the possibility of someone being able to successfully sue for medical malpractice or negligence.
Absolutely not. And I would say the majority of the time I bring a medical malpractice case or any case, the death certificate won't necessarily support the claim or the theory of the case that I'm ultimately going to bring.
If you're dealing with a case where there's a short time between someone's discharge from a hospital, from a medical facility, and death, does that automatically raise red flags?
I would say yes, especially in this case where it seemed like there was a day or 24 hours between it. The question is going to become, what did that medical facility, in this case a hospital, know, or what should they have known before releasing him home at the time? Especially in a 24-hour period like that, they had him under their care and supervision. So they should have known that there was a potential that if they released him in 24 hours for something like this to happen, that's a huge red flag for me and something I would point to immediately in bringing a claim like this.
How significant is it that you have the police department, the Clearwater Police Department? They're apparently still investigating this. They haven't released the body cam footage, which we've talked about a lot during the course of this story. You have that going on, and then a potential lawsuit. I mean, how does that affect it?
I think that's less important than the red flag we just talked about. I think the body cam footage can bring context. There might be some facts in there that help support a civil claim or a medical malpractice claim. But ultimately, when you're talking about a medical malpractice claim, the medical records are going to carry the day. The expert medical opinions, the coroner's report or the medical examiner's report. The medicine is what you need to support your case in this situation. Everything else can help provide context or color to those claims. But if you don't have the medicine, if you don't have the medical negligence, the departure from the standard of care, you can't bring the case regardless of what the body cam footage may say in a case like this.
By the way, can families compel the release of records during a civil case?
So definitely. So during a civil case, you can always get medical records. It's the family or when there's a death like this, the representative of the family, the estate, the administrator, or the executor, they're always going to be able to request medical records. And once the litigation is started, there's ways to compel discovery, whether that be through subpoenas, if the person's not a party, or if it's a party to the case. So one of the defendants, for example, a hospital, a doctor, they're going to be required to turn over whatever discoverable information they have. Anything that's potentially relevant to the case is going to have to be turned over. So you're going to have the stuff you compel from the parties, and then things you can compel from outside parties through a court subpoena.
And generally speaking, when we're talking about this claim of potentially a phrenic nerve injury during a medical procedure, during a surgery, have you ever seen that factor into a potential medical malpractice claim?
I've never dealt with a case specifically dealing with that type of nerve injury, so it's not something I've seen. But anything can support a medical malpractice case, even if it's a little removed from what ultimately is the death in this case. So I believe in this case, it was something, the surgery was maybe in May and he passed away in July. So anytime there's a departure and that negligence continues throughout, and it's something that someone is experiencing difficulties with, if it causes the death or causes further injury, that's going to be the critical inquiry. Is there causation here between the type of nerve injury he suffered? Well, first of all, you have to prove that he did suffer a nerve injury. Right. And I know there's speculation about that now and there's talk about that, but the records, like I said before, have to bear that out. So you have to have the negligence or the initial malpractice, and then you're going to need causation. And the further removed from the surgery the death is, it's going to be harder to prove causation.
Isn't this just a battle of experts? The plaintiffs will have their own expert who say there's causation, the defense will say no, and then it's up to the jury at a trial to hash it all out, figure it all out?
A lot of the times you're absolutely correct, especially if the case goes to trial. Both sides are going to be able to find experts that say opposing theories, and it is up to who the jury believes. And that's where kind of the context we talked about earlier in the body cam footage, and if other witnesses step forward, that's when that evidence really starts to come into play, because jurors are smart enough that at trial, they're going to understand that the plaintiff's experts are going to support their theory and the defendant's experts are going to support the defense theory. So you have to paint a picture for the jury that something not right happened here, and you should believe our expert because look at all this other evidence that supports that theory. Look, for example, in this situation, there's talk about people who came forward to Hulk Hogan's daughter and were blowing the whistle on certain things they didn't like. That will all help color the situation for the jury to get them to understand that the plaintiffs have the correct theory of the case.
You mentioned Brooke Hogan. You mentioned Hulk Hogan's daughter. Let me just talk about it real quick before we get into the newest update here. So she's a very interesting person in all of this because we heard from her. We heard from her that professionals allegedly contacted her directly about this case. So on August 20th, she posted on Instagram, quote, "Fact, I've 100% gotten legit calls from professionals, from police officials to nurses that were supposedly with my dad on the day of his death telling me I need to see body cam footage and I need to get a hold of the 911 tapes because they supposedly contain information that could potentially shed enough light to change the narrative everyone's been hearing. Those same professionals feel so passionately about what they witnessed, they have continued to contact me and push me to find specific answers to this very day. They are quite literally putting their careers at risk because they feel so compelled to do the right thing." Now, she has appeared to soften that because we reported on this in a previous episode of Sidebar that she told TMZ and Bubba the Love Sponge, his radio show, that everyone appears to be on the up and up, saying to Bubba, "I was able to see my dad and he looked great. He looked like he was ready for a pay-per-view wrestling event," because she was able to see the body. She confirmed to TMZ that she saw incision scars on his body, which showed an autopsy was performed. She was able to say her final goodbyes. She said that this was very helpful for her. Quote, everybody appears to be acting in good faith and doing the right thing. I feel good going home, that I got to see my dad. I got to see the autopsy done. I know there's still more investigating to do. From what my heart is telling me, everybody's on the up and up and trying to do their jobs. But the family has now taken a formal step to potentially pursue legal action. Okay? Before we get into the details of that filing, Perry, what is the legal significance of, if this is true, professionals allegedly contacting family members directly? I don't know what this is about, but it is interesting to say the least.
So the legal significance is relative to the information they have to provide. So again, it's context. I spoke before about what the jury sees at the end of the case. Obviously, if a defendant has their own employees or their own staff members relaying information against them to the plaintiffs, that's a strong factor in their mind for when they have to evaluate this case and how to litigate the case or how hard to defend the case. So again, the medical information, the records, the expert opinions, that's going to carry the day in a medical malpractice case. But still, there's a lawsuit is a story being told in the one hand. And if part of the story that the plaintiffs have is the defendant's own employees relaying information or talking about the wrongs that were committed here, that's a strong fact in favor of the plaintiff that the defendants don't want to see. And it may weigh heavily in their minds on whether they settle the case or whether they take it to trial, because ultimately they know that what's being told during the case, if that comes out in a deposition or in other discovery, that's something the jury's going to see. And ultimately, if you're a lawyer who's litigating, doing any type of litigation, you have to be thinking down the road, if this case goes to trial, what is that going to look like? So that's really where that's going to come into play. And obviously, the information that's been coming out has to support the medical opinions. If it's so contrary to what the records say, then a plaintiff's attorney may not put too much weight on it or may not use it at all if they don't think it supports their theory of the case.
So now let's move on to the big update. Last week, Hogan's family filed a petition in Pinellas County requesting a 90-day extension for the statute of limitations in order to investigate a possible medical malpractice lawsuit. So the filing names Morton Plant Hospital, where Hogan was pronounced dead, Tampa General Hospital doctors Thomas Rausch, who is an orthopedic spine doctor, Guilherme H. Oliveira, who specializes in cardiology and heart failure, and, quote, any and all other applicable health care providers. Perry, why is this so significant? Can you explain what this means exactly to ask for a petition for an extension here?
So this is interesting because this is something that's specific to Florida law, and each state, when it comes to civil law or medical malpractice, has a different standard. Generally, I could say from my experience, most states are kind of discouraging medical malpractice cases, whether that be with the statute of limitations or caps on damages. Here, what Florida does is they almost have this pre-suit investigation period in all medical malpractice cases. So it's being reported about this petition as if it was a very significant step, but in reality, it's kind of the standard whenever there's a medical malpractice case that's potentially going to be brought. And the rule requires there to be pre-suit investigation by the plaintiff side in order to two things: make sure that there is a case to be brought, because if during this period they figure out that there's not a case, the plaintiffs in theory are not supposed to bring it after that period. The other thing is they want to make sure that they're naming only the proper defendants. So here they already have a couple defendants that they know what hospitals he was treated at, they know which doctors, but there may be more people involved, and that's kind of the purpose of this 90-day period. And what I think is interesting is that the rule in Florida during this 90-day period actually requires the defendants also to do their own investigation, and they're required to go through their insurance company. They're required to supposedly do some informal discovery, which I assume means turning over the medical records to the plaintiff. And in the end, if the defendants find through their experts that there is no case and they don't think that there's a theory the plaintiffs can bring their case under, they're supposed to turn over either an affidavit from a doctor or some type of defense medical opinion to say, hey, we don't think you have a case here. And the purpose of that is to discourage the plaintiffs from bringing the case in the first instance. So this 90-day period extends the statute of limitations, which in Florida, to bring a medical malpractice case is 2 years. So the plaintiffs have 2 years. This just gives them an extra 90 days during which they can do an investigation and figure out what the case is and what the case isn't.
Is this petition usually granted?
Yeah, it seems like in Florida, it's a formality that they're always granted, and for those same reasons, it's in the court's interest too to either narrow the issues, make sure they have the proper parties, or to see the case not brought at all and not waste judicial resources.
When you see who's being named here, and you're talking about multiple doctors and hospitals, and by the way, the catch-all phrase, any and all applicable healthcare providers, what does that tell you about how complex this case is? Or what does it tell you about the level of responsibility or shared responsibility or alleged responsibility about who was named here?
It tells me that it's going to potentially be a complicated case. Now, if I'm bringing a medical malpractice case, I always want it to be as clean as possible. So the perfect case is you have one hospital or one doctor. It's clear 1v1. Anytime you start bringing multiple facilities into the picture, it tells you have a complicated timeline. You have an individual who is medically compromised in a way that they had to visit multiple facilities. And those facilities are going to start pointing the finger at each other, too. So hospital A is going to say, well, it was hospital B's fault. We did everything we were supposed to do. So now you're fighting multiple battles in the same lawsuit, in the same litigation. And that always makes things more complicated. And the catch-all phrase that they included here is pretty common, especially at this early stage. But what that signals is we're not done with our investigation yet. We think we know some of the proper parties, but there may be more parties. Now, that's not going to stand throughout the litigation. You have to name specific parties. But as long as the investigation is going and they have this pre-suit investigation period, they're saying, we're going to let you know we think there may be more people involved here.
And does this give you an idea of what claims might be potentially being pursued, how strong these claims might be, what we're looking at as a potential litigation?
It's hard to say from the parties and hospitals that are named. Again, it depends once you get those records, what happened at each facility. But if everything seems to be based off this nerve injury, the theory would be that each hospital did or didn't do something regarding that nerve injury to put the family on notice or to help Hulk Hogan during this process where they knew that he had this prior surgery. So if you have to tie the litigation or the death back to the initial injury, everybody who had a chance to help him during that period is going to be a potential defendant. They're going to say, you knew or you should have known that he had this surgery. It was in his records, and you knew that there was something not right here. He was having breathing difficulties. The nerve was severed was one of the claims. Whatever the records bear out, they have to show causation. So they have to show that the death was caused by the initial injury. And when he's been seen by multiple hospitals throughout who cleared him and sent him home, it's going to be a tough hill to climb.
Perry Fallick, thanks for coming on. I mean, this is a interesting but complicated update in what is already an interesting and complicating story. We'll continue to follow it here on Sidebar. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.